Lecture 6, Emotions, Relationships, and Society. If you had been following along this class up to this point, you should see that situational conditions contextualize almost every action and decision that we make. Emotions are in a different category for many people. Do you choose the emotions that come to you when someone calls you a name or treats you poorly? Do you choose to be sexually attracted to someone else? Many times, people say that our emotions are almost animalistic in nature, outside of our intellectual control. The goal of this chapter is to understand the situational conditions that impact emotions. It will also examine how people form relationships that house many of our emotions. With any luck, you can use this information to build positive relationships with the people that you want to and avoid those choices and emotions that work against those relationships. Contextualizing emotions. Think about a situation that tends to produce emotions in your life right now. Consider your average day. If you live in a big city and commute to work each day, the gridlock heading to work may be associated with stress or even anger as other commuters block your path to work. At work, perhaps you are bored with your work, a lack of emotion, or have a bad boss who causes you stress and anger. What do each of these examples have in common? In each case, situations produce emotions, and at the end of the day, you can add it all up and decide if you had a good day or a bad day by the amount of positive or negative emotions you experienced. The other lessons from this review is that common situations are associated with specific emotions. Very few people would say that traffic or a bad boss produce positive emotions. You may find that self-help books and other people advise you to look at it another way, to view the same things in a different light. But for most of us, common situations produce the same emotions again and again. In many cases, societal cultures create situations that provoke us to feel a certain way. A note on nihilism. Nihilism is a philosophy that has probably been around in one form or another for thousands of years. It is often associated with more recent philosophers such as Nietzsche. The idea overlaps with symbolic interaction in that it espouses the idea that you cannot attach too much value to people or objects around you because none of it inherently has any value. Of course, the physical world, including people, are real in that they exist, but their value is not inherent. There is no inherent value in a person or a pet or an award that you won in sports. They only have value because we give them value. Does that sound familiar? This may sound like a boring philosophy lecture, but it is important to the study of emotions because I challenge you to decide whether you believe that there is real value in your relationships with other people, pets, or objects. If you don't believe that the world has value to you, you can use symbolic interaction to manipulate those things to your advantage. I don't espouse this point of view, but I bet you can think of people in your life who have treated the people around them without respect and used you or other people to their own advantage. They can do this because they don't really care about you or anyone else unless they can help them in some way. That is the risk of symbolic interaction in philosophies like nihilism. It creates a constant soap opera where people decide in the moment how to manipulate situations and people to their advantage. There are no real relationships. It is mostly just a facade. All of that said, I believe that you can use symbolic interactionism to be a better partner, friend, pet companion, or owner of an object. That is how we are going to try to frame our discussion in this chapter. Emotional scripts. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to. This is a famous song by the American singer Leslie Gore, expressing her honesty about how she feels even though she's at a party, a time and place where she's supposed to be happy. If you recall the concept of scripts, the idea is that in different situations, we have different roles and behaviors that are expected. Those situations have emotional scripts as well, how people are supposed to feel during those situations. What emotional scripts are associated with the following scenes? 1. A Super Bowl in which your team just won. 2. The funeral of your grandmother. 3. Your neighbor's barbecue party. 4. A first date. If you take each of these situations, you should be able to immediately think of an overall theme like happy, sad, or nervous. But like our earlier analysis this semester, take some time to write out the whole story. What do you do at each event, step by step? At each step, what emotions might occur? Let's take the first date. Step 1, the pickup. What emotions would you expect here? Step 2, the dinner itself. What emotions do you expect here? Step 3, the other event, going to the movies, a dance, or other activity. And finally, the drop-off. How do you think each of the members of this group would respond in this situation? What emotions would they have? What emotions might be dominant in each scenario? While being nervous about how things will dominate many of the scenes, there are moments of potential joy, for example, a good dance or a first kiss, and relief, watching a movie where you can relax your front stage a bit, or dropping the person off. The point is that you can use your knowledge of culture to predict what people should feel in a particular moment. There's nothing wrong with this. In fact, although emotional scripts vary by culture, to some degree, it would be difficult to have a good relationship with other people if you don't participate in these emotional scripts. They help us to assess our own emotional health. Knowing what people are supposed to be feeling in a given situation can help to better prepare our response to be more understanding and helpful. Think about a situation in which you're a manager and one of your workers comes in and shares that one of their parents has just taken ill. You must manage your desire to be productive, that is your role as a manager, with the needs of your employee. You know that you have to display some caring. How might you reconcile the need for rational needs of the organization and the emotional script for your employee? That is what separates an otherwise good manager from a great one. The great one knows how to deal with this situation in a way that satisfies both needs. Emotional socialization. How do we learn emotional scripts? I would argue that there are two parts to this answer. First, there are technical rules, and second, there are the emotions themselves. Most primatologists would agree that even our chimp cousins share basic emotions like happiness and sadness, and even context can produce these emotions. The real question is how much and what emotions are appropriate to have. That requires a little more work. Consider someone who just lost a spouse because of a long bout of cancer. What emotions should this person have? Counselors will say that while sadness is normal, so would be a sense of relief. It is very common for counselors to help patients come to terms with these mixed emotions. They are teaching them what is appropriate to feel or not. How much emotion is enough? Getting angry might be a natural outcome of a disagreement, but there are limits. Spouse abuse often reflects this inability to limit emotional expression. Alternatively, you know that I spent some time in the Marines, and it is not uncommon for two men to end in a disagreement in a fight. And many times, this is not deemed unacceptable. Different situations set up different rules for what and how much emotion should be expressed. Relationships and society. Love and relationships are mostly studied in psychology. Sociologists can contribute to this analysis in several ways. First, review Sternberg's classic triangle theory of love that comes from psychology. It helps to show the many ways that we can love people. While our friends may not be sexual partners, passion, they do share positive emotion, liking, and more or less commitment. Also, relationships can change over time. While you may have a lover with all three components, over time, one of them may die off, say passion. Does this mean that there is no love? Not really, but it is a different relationship. That aspect may come back in time, but another one goes away. Hence, relationships can change over time, but you can still say that you love someone. What is the situational context of relationships? There are at least three ways that you can create liking among people, whether they are lovers or friends: proximity, homophily, and familiarity. Proximity means that we tend to like the people who are around us. Most research shows that we develop friendships with the people in our immediate surroundings. Over time, however, homophily takes over. That is, as we learn about people's backgrounds, we tend to find friends among people who share similar traits and roles in their lives. And finally, familiarity. Familiarity is the idea that we tend to like people that we get to know better, whether they're in proximity or homophily. There are other things as well that impact whether we develop relationships with people, but those are three of the most common that you'll see in the literature. How might knowing this information help you in any way? First, if you're trying to get into a relationship, finding ways to increase the things that will put you in context to those other people will help immensely. Consider ways that you can increase contact. Most of this occurs in institutional settings like work or school or maybe even a hobby. Alternatively, if your relationship is terrible, you can try to work them out by, say, creating a similar hobby. That would be homophily, or spending more time together, sharing about yourself, increasing familiarity. These are classic solutions to marital and relationship problems. They're not perfect solutions because people are not robots who simply respond to situations in positive ways. It takes some level of work and agency and commitment on the parts of each member of the relationship. But if you think about them creatively, you can use this information to be a better partner or develop relationships with other people around you in a positive way. Stockholm Syndrome. The power of proximity, homophily, and familiarity cannot be understated. Studies have shown that even enemies can develop an emotional bond when they spend time together. This is not a perfect relationship, however. While you may have heard of the Stockholm Syndrome, where some captors developed a relationship with their captors, the majority did not. The socio-emotional economy. The economic theory of relationships is based on individuals maximizing what they get out of relationships. While pretty harsh, there is some value of understanding this. Some sociologists hold on to this principle, but do it under the heading of social exchange theory. Social exchange theory is the idea that people enter relationships of any kind to get something from them and leave them when they no longer get what they want. That sounds pretty much like economics. Social exchange theory goes a bit further than this. First, people exchange instrumental needs like food and shelter, as well as socio-emotional needs like love and affection. So people may get different things out of a relationship, and their demands may change over time. You may marry for love, but later get something else, like companionship, later in the relationship. There are also different types of exchanges. Direct exchanges include those exchanges in which there is an immediate return for your giving. The easiest example is a store where you give money in exchange for an item. In a relationship, it may be less clear, but it may be an exchange of duties. You take out the garbage if I do the dishes. This sets up the norm of reciprocity, whereby people expect to give about the type and quantity of things that they get. What happens when someone gets less out of a relationship than they give? According to the theory, it produces a negative emotion, and people eventually will want to leave that relationship. How might you use this information in your own life? Consider your own relationships right now. Are you giving more in a particular relationship than you're getting out of it? How does that make you feel? On the other hand, are you getting more out of a relationship than you're giving? Consider how you might rectify this situation. I can almost guarantee that your partner or friend will notice it right away. Community relations. This class is occurring during the 2020 pandemic. This event has shown how interactions between people can connect us from all over the globe. While complex, it is clear that we are all connected in a series of individual and group exchanges. Social exchange theory includes what are called indirect or generalized exchanges. They are exchanges with people with whom we only have contact through other people, such as a friend of a friend. Indirect exchanges are essential to community and society because they bind us all together. So, when we buy something from a store, the money does not stay at the store. It goes to other parties who use that money to either pay for expenses at the store, or the excess is either invested or spent on the owner's personal items. Either way, your money gets dispersed to any number of people. However, the nature of society has changed over the last 10,000 years. For all but about 500 years, the world has lived in what's called a Gemeinschaft environment, where people had more direct exchanges and closer networks of indirect relationships. Again, friends of friends. Today, because of modern technology, we have moved to a Gesellschaft environment where people rely more on strangers. The result is a kind of social distance that makes it difficult to build strong emotional bonds as people have larger, more impersonal relationships. How might you use these models to build strong, positive relationships with other people? Consider the number of relationships you have. Find ways to focus on a few and build trust among people in those relationships. How would you do that? Consider the concepts of reciprocity, proximity, homophily, and familiarity. Build on those ideas. Some people will be more receptive to it than others. Try to focus on those connections in particular because they are much more likely to reciprocate. And we know the power of reciprocity. Conclusions. This short review of the symbolic interaction approach to relationships is designed to explain situational context for emotions. Like other aspects of culture, there are norms in the type and level of expression of emotions, both positive and negative. People exchange emotions in relationships, and these exchanges are important to building and maintaining those relationships. While some people could use this information to manipulate other people, like a nihilist, the rest of us can use these concepts and theories of relationships to build stronger, deeper, and longer-lasting relationships with friends and family. The trick is that everyone has to be on board. That is going to be tougher in a culture founded on Gesellschaft principles.